error. So I completely blame Zoom on that, and very much apologize. Okay, let's try this again, and we'll hope that it works better this time. Okay. All right, hoping that this stays connected. So, intro to web development. There's a lot that goes into this idea of web development covers a lot of different aspects. This is actually a pretty good word cloud of being a web developer or software engineer. Those two titles are kind of interchangeable. Some people want to get really kind of nitpicky, and they'll come up with a lot of differences between a web developer and a software engineer. I don't care what you call yourself. I go by both in the professional world. So yeah, software engineer and web developer are kind of interchangeable. And there's just a lot that goes into what we do every day as web developers. And the very basic idea of being a web developer is to be able to communicate through your code, through your programming code, be able to communicate to a computer at a computer's level. So how does a computer communicate? Down at the very basic, the very lowest level of computer communications, it's just zeros and ones. It's binary code. Thankfully, we don't have to write all of our code in zeros and ones because we have languages that have been developed by extremely smart people that will compile or will be translated from what we write in the specific language all the way down to those zeros and ones for a computer to understand. So when we're writing words that we understand and that we recognize. But we have to remember that we're basically communicating with a computer, and we're giving a computer a very specific set of instructions. And we need to structure our code and structure our what we're writing in such a way that it makes sense to the computer, and so that the computer will actually do what we think it's going to do. So in order to talk about what it means to be a web developer, we need to understand how the internet works, how these applications that we'll be building work. An application is also kind of a broad word. It can be a web application that you access on the internet. For example, Facebook. If you go into a browser like Chrome and you type in facebook.com, a web application is where you'll be directed to. Then there's also software applications that you can download onto your computer. There's mobile applications that we download on our phones and tabs. So yeah, there's a lot of, so when we say application, we're basically just meaning any kind of interface, user interface that we as the end users are directed to when we open an app on our phone or when we go to a specific website. So when we open that website, when we type in facebook.com, and the landing page comes up and it asks for our login credentials, and we type in our username and our password, and we hit login, there's a request that's sent from our computer from that website out to one of Facebook's servers. And that communication that's happening, that server, after that it receives that communication, will then send some communication to Facebook's databases and say, okay, this person has given me this email and this password. Does it match the profile of someone we have in our database? And then the database sends back that profile to the server, and the server sends back that information to to our website, to our web application. And there's a lot that happens that we don't even understand when we are using these applications, whether it's on a computer or on a phone, or downloaded on our computer or on a website. Everything is kind of going through this same process of send a request, communicate from your application to a server, to a database, and all the way back. So when we talk about web development, a lot of times people are referring to this idea of a front-end developer. And a front-end developer is usually just writing the code for the application itself. So what your user actually sees on the website, what your user sees on their mobile device as they are interacting with it. And so everything, that's the front-end world of software engineering, is the user interface, what your end user sees and is using in these applications. So there's some code that lives on the application, on the website itself. There's a different set of code that lives on the servers, and an entirely different set of code that lives on the databases. And the servers and database code, the code that tells the servers what to do when they receive requests and tells the database what to do when it is receiving that communication, that code is written by back-end engineers. So back-end engineers generally don't have to write the code that is styling your website and is making those requests from your website, from your browser. They're actually writing a lot more of the computer science type code that lives on servers and databases. Then someone who writes code for all three of these different areas is considered a full stack engineer. So this is kind of important for you to start to understand and learn right now, because as you go through Lambda, you'll have a goal to get a job at the end of the course, and maybe you're switching careers, maybe you're in a career and you're just wanting to come through Lambda to learn JavaScript or something like that. You're trying to switch in your job set within this career. Whatever it is, you're probably looking to get a job after this program. And it will be important for you to understand where your strengths are and what you enjoy doing more, because a front-end engineer, their code and what they do every day is a lot different than a back-end engineer. What I mean by that is I personally am a front-end engineer, and I write all the code that lives in your browser, and that people that build the applications that people are interfacing with every day. And the reason that I enjoy front-end work more than back-end work is I like the design aspect of programming more so than I like the computer science aspect of programming. So if you feel like you're kind of more design oriented, I have a background in photography, and it lends really well to the front-end world. If you feel like you like to make the websites look really good, you like the user experience, making the user experience smooth and clean, then you'll probably end up enjoying front-end work more than you would back-end work. If you're more kind of mathematical minded, if you don't need to see beautiful designs that you've created, if you'd rather see database queries going really, really fast, or server communication being really optimized and organized, and all these algorithms that help you sort data and serve that data up in very, very quickly to the web applications, you'll probably be more oriented toward back-end work. That being said, a lot of us choose to go full stack and like to be a part of the entire product as a whole, where we build the website and we design it and it looks good and it works well for users, and then we write the code on the servers in the database that is giving that website all the data that it needs. So it's good to understand these different areas that you can work as a developer. Okay, so let's talk about, we're mostly going to be covering front-end stuff in this intro class. And the three languages we use on the in front-end work are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, these languages are very different, and they serve very specific purposes in building, say, a website or a mobile application. So HTML kind of builds the content and structure of a website. CSS is what we use to style everything that you see on a web application, on a website. And then JavaScript gives a website or defines the behavior of a website. So when you click on a button, what does it do? What does the website do? To give you an idea of all of this, let's look at a couple things here. Let's see. Trying to remember what this. Got it in my notes somewhere. Okay, so let's just go to Facebook. And I'm going to log out. Oh, yay, there's my family. Hello. That picture is very old, from probably 3 years ago. Okay. All right, so let's look at this website here. So we're on the login page of Facebook, and you can see that it's got a very specific design structure. So if we go top to bottom, we notice that there's 3 distinct sections within this website: a header, kind of this body section, and then this footer down here at the bottom. And then if we look at the body section here in the middle, we notice that there's 2 kind of main columns going left to right. And in each column, going from top to bottom, there are headers. Looks like this is either just text or a subheader even. We've got these boxes over here on the left to let us log in with different accounts quickly. On the right, if we're creating a new account, same thing. We've got a header, some text. We've got some input fields, birth date fields, and then this sign up button. So the HTML inside this website is defining the structure, is defining where these 3 different, the header section, the body section, the footer section, these columns within the body section here, it's giving this site, this web application, this structure, and saying this element of this web page goes here, and this element goes here. This one goes on top. This one goes to the right. We can look at it. Oh, it doesn't let us. We don't need console. We want this. Here we go. We can look at it even right here inside our dev tools in our browser. So in Chrome, if you right-click and click on Inspect, it'll open this kind of nav, this bar up on the side, or it could be on the bottom. You can place it wherever you want if you click on the 3 menu tools up here. I like to put it on the right. We can hover over all of these different elements that are written in the HTML of this page. So we're looking at HTML code right here for Facebook. And as we hover over every different element, we can see that it's highlighted and it's structured very specifically. We can even dig down further into some of these and see that even within some of these, if we look at this box with my profile picture over here on the left, we can dig down and see that everything kind of has its own little, its own piece of the code. So everything is defined in the code, even down to this little red badge with the number 13 in there. So this is called a span element, and this piece of code is what defines that this badge is here. Now, the HTML, this code that we're looking at, isn't actually giving this badge its red color or even its round shape, or telling the text inside it to be white. That is defined by the CSS. So if we look back at the presentation here, our HTML is our structural language, and our CSS is our presentational. So it gives it, the HTML is giving that website its content, and the CSS is giving it its style. So if we look at it, down in this bottom half of our dev tools is the CSS for this page. So that little badge that we're looking at, I clicked on it right here in our HTML, and you can see it's highlighted over there on the left. This is the CSS that was written for that specific badge. And we can actually kind of play around with this and take away some of the styling. So let's make this yellow, and we took away the border radius, so now it's a box instead of a circle. We can double its height and say we want it to, instead of 24. Let me zoom in on this a little bit so we can see a little bit better. So right now it's got a height defined as 24 pixels. If we take that away and say 48, and then say, and we've now doubled the height of that element. Excuse me. So you can see even though none of the HTML here has changed, we're changing the CSS, and we're giving it a completely different look than what it was originally designed with. So if we kind of kick everything back here, oh, it's not letting us go back. That's okay. We'll give that back. We'll say red back there, even though that's not the same red. That's okay. So kind of back to where we were. So we can kind of play around with the different styling here in CSS. Here in our HTML, the HTML gives this page the content, so we can even kind of play around with the HTML. So now instead of 13 notifications, I just changed it to say 35 just by playing with it here. That doesn't mean that in Facebook's database it now thinks that there's 35 notifications for my Facebook profile. This is just a temporary change that we can do just here in the dev tools. And actually, kind of a cool thing that we can do here is we can look at these inputs. So if I change this password here, because I don't want you to see my real password, if I right-click on this password input field and click inspect, we look at the input. We can see the input right here on the right. It doesn't tell us what is inside it, because that would obviously kind of ruin the idea of having these dots. Um, Kind of like you see in some other, like when we were down here looking at that badge with 13, it actually has the number 13 right there in the code. Inputs work a little bit differently. So here's our password input. You can see that this input has the type password. If you go to your friend's Facebook, I might get in trouble for saying this, but I like to teach this because it's fun. If you go to your friend's Facebook page and they've got the password auto-filled in here, right-click, inspect, find where it says type, and instead of password, let's give this the type text. Now, when I hit enter, it's actually going to reveal the text that I typed into there. Password. So if you have someone that you want to find their password on Facebook, there's the simple way to do it. Okay, hopefully I don't get in trouble for teaching you that. All right, so that's kind of the power of HTML and CSS is we can, in our code, define all of these things, and we can make this input a password input so that the browser automatically knows to hide the text there. This input is a text input as they've coded it. So it knows to show the input. It's actually probably type email. So it knows to show the text there. So that's what JavaScript and CSS are. They build the structure and they give the design for what we're trying to build. The JavaScript is kind of, that's where you'll spend most of your time as a developer, is actually writing the logic or the JavaScript for these websites. The JavaScript is the behavioral part of this front-end world trio here. So the JavaScript is what tells this website what to do when I click login. And it's what tells the this outline, or it tells this input that I don't have a password inside here. So it's giving me a warning because I don't have that correct. I haven't typed it in. So it's saying, it's the JavaScript saying, okay, input, there is an error here, so apply the warning CSS styling rules to this input. And then as I start typing, you'll notice right away that it takes away that red outline. It takes away the red warning symbol here, because JavaScript in this website has said, okay, CSS, go ahead and just show the normal input, because it thinks now that I'm typing a correct password, right? If there's nothing in there, then it says, uh-oh, we've got a problem, there's an issue. JavaScript is what is detecting that and making that happen. If we look at Lambda School, just last example here real quick, and then we'll jump into some coding. If we go to lambdaschool.com, I want you to take a look at just this front part right here. This landing page is what we call this. And just for about 30 seconds, I want you to look at all the elements that are on this website. And I want you to try and pinpoint what part of this website is HTML, or what the HTML for this website is doing and defining, and what the CSS is doing. And then where would JavaScript come into play in this specific site. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to kind of look at this and think about what role are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript playing just in this website right here. Okay, so hopefully you're kind of imagining that the HTML is what has decided that that we have a picture over here, that we've got some text. Now, don't get confused. HTML isn't saying that this text isn't defining the size of this text being larger than this text. It's just saying, hey, we've got text here, we've got text here, and underneath both sets of text, we've got a button, and inside that button, we've got some text. So HTML is doing all of that. It's also saying that there's a logo up here in the top left, and we've got this menu section over here in the top right. And it's defining the titles for each of these menu items. So the actual text inside these. So that's what HTML is doing here. CSS is telling this website to render kind of this diagonal, this really cool diagonal look that we've got going on. CSS is telling this button to be red and kind of have these rounded corners and have all the spacing above the text and below the text that's defined in CSS. It's also more than likely, you can actually do this in either CSS or JavaScript, but it's probably telling this button that when I hover my mouse over it to change the color a little bit, kind of go into that lighter red color. Even the CSS is even telling the mouse icon to change from this basic pointer icon to this hand icon that we all recognize now and know that this is a clickable thing, that I can click on this and it'll do something. So that's what CSS is doing. Let's look at this menu. Well, JavaScript real quick is what happens is defining what happens when we actually click on this button. So JavaScript tells it to go to this web page here, lambdaschool.com/about. So that's JavaScript. If we look at this menu is kind of an interesting thing because we've got these drop downs that show up when we hover over either of these two menu items. So if we look at this drop down, the drop down is actually the behavior of this drop down is that it actually shows up when we hover is coming from JavaScript. So it's the JavaScript in this website that's telling this specific drop down box to appear under tracks when I hover under tracks. But the structure of this little box is defined by HTML, and the content is defined by HTML, all the words. Then the color of the links, and again the mouse, the rounded corners of this box, the size of this little arrow at the top, the fact that this header is capitalized, is in all caps, uppercase, all of that is defined by CSS. So everywhere that we look throughout this website, we can start to define which language we're using to build all of these cool things. Okay, so let's take a look at how we even begin building something like this. And we usually begin by building an HTML file. So we usually start with HTML. If we
Seems like we may have crashed again. Just give it another brief moment and he'll be back shortly.
Okay, I think I'm back on, but there we go. Nope. Trying to get control back. My Zoom obviously doesn't like that presentation that I was trying to share because it quit on me again. So if Thomas is there, can you make me a co-host again so I can share? Oh, I might be. Yes, continue. Okay, I think we've got it. And it looks like I'm actually in the meeting twice now. All right, really sorry about that. We are not going to go back into that presentation because when 2 times now that I've gone to that presentation, it's died on me. I even closed out of it. So, okay. We're going to jump into
Dustin, it looks like your video might be off.
all right. Can you see my screen?
I don't believe so. Let me see if I can fix that.
Okay. Oh, I think I see what everybody's looking at now. Still the lambdaschool.com. Do you want me to leave and join again?
There we go. We're looking currently at your 650.
Okay. Yep, perfect. Okay, let me find on my notes since I don't have it on my computer, since we could out of that. So we'll be just 1 second. Thanks for being patient with us, everyone, through these weird issues that we're having here. Okay. Okay. All right. So when we want to start building a website, we're going to start with HTML. And there's a few ways that we can write code. And we write code in text editors, or there's also these online sandbox environments. So there's some really great free text editors. Okay, there we go. There's some really great free text editors that we can that we suggest you use. So there's 3 of them in particular: Sublime, Atom, or VS Code. So if you join the full-time program or the part-time program, if you join one of our programs, you'll be using one of those code editors, text editors. For this whole program, we won't need to use those. We're going to use some really cool online tools called sandbox environments. For these first couple lessons, we're going to use CodePen. So if you go to codepen.io and sign up for a free account, then you can do the homework. This is where you'll do the homework and for these first few classes. And this is where we're actually going to be programming and coding. Today we're going to learn about just a few HTML tags or elements. And so we don't need JavaScript right now, so I'm going to minimize my JavaScript editor. Not maximize, there we go. You know what, we can just drag it. We're going to leave CSS pretty small, just in case we need to highlight something. We'll use CSS to do that. Okay, so what is an HTML tag? So an HTML tag is basically a way in our code that we define an HTML element. If we look at Lambda School right here, lambdaschool.com, there's a lot of different elements on this page. So when we're talking about HTML elements, we're talking about this block of text as a single element. This block of text is a different element. This button is an element on this page. This logo is an element. So it's every tiny little piece that makes up our website or our application. Those are all elements, and those are defined and built in HTML. And with every language that we're going to write, whether it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or later on some of the computer science languages that we're going to learn, there's very specific syntax that we need to follow. In other words, there's a very specific way that we need to type out our code. So an HTML tag is just basically the syntax for creating an element on a web page. One of the most commonly used elements is a div tag. So when we're writing HTML, you always use this open caret, and then you write the name. You type the name of the cancel. I want to do that. Make this a little bit bigger. So use this caret syntax where you've got the open caret and then the name of the element and then a closing caret. And then, so this is an HTML tag right here. And this is an HTML closing tag. So inside this div element, we're going to have something inside of it. So we need to be able to tell our code, we need to tell the browser that we've got this element here and we're going to have some content inside it. But we need to tell the browser when this element ends, where it ends. So we can have, so a div tag is basically, or is a division tag. That's what it is. That's what div is short for, is for division. So it basically is a section of code like this. This is probably wrapped inside a div code here, div tag here. And this part of the text is probably wrapped inside a div tag. This button is actually probably wrapped inside a div tag as well. And this whole column, all three of these elements are probably wrapped inside a div tag for this column, and probably even this, the logo, are probably all wrapped inside a div tag here. So div tag, we're just dividing our website into all these smaller sections, and then div tags have some sort of, or usually have content inside of it. A p tag is a paragraph element. So when we see text on a website that's not header text, it's just normal text, it's usually wrapped in a p tag. As you can see here, we've got our opening tag and our closing tag and some text for the content. There's when you type a p tag, when you use a p tag, a paragraph element, you're almost always, or you're basically always using that for text. And you can define multiple tags inside as child tag elements of this upper element here. So inside this div tag, we now have 5 different elements, all of which are these little paragraphs. And you can see in this awesome coding environment, sandbox environment, it's displaying exactly what we're creating over here on the right. When we have a couple other, these are probably some of the most commonly used elements in HTML. There's a couple other ones. One would be a span element. A span is a little bit different in that it usually wraps text as well. But if you notice, as we did as we created a new line and created a new paragraph element, so let's just give it a different text. This is our second paragraph element. So as we created a new paragraph element, you'll notice that we actually got a line break from this first paragraph element, and our second one came on a new line. It didn't go, it didn't stay up here on the left line as some of you might expect it actually to do. If you need text that stays on the same line, you can use a span tag. So now, even though we've dropped a line here, we dropped a line from line 4 to line 5 to create our new element. It stayed on the same line as our other span element up here. So you'll learn very quickly the different behaviors of these different elements. You'll learn very quickly that a p tag at the end of it does have a line break. And so if you define a second p tag, it will drop a line and continue the next line down. Span tags go left to right and don't have line breaks at the end. So there's a very good use case for span tags. The other thing that we can use span tags for is, let's go ahead and move these. Let's say we want a let's say we want these two words here to be bold instead of just this normal text. Say we want this to be bold. We can wrap, we can define another span element inside of our paragraph element, just completely wrapping that set of text. And now we have the ability to grab or to target these two words within our CSS and define some rules for it and say font size, oh, that's not what I want. Font size, not font size, font weight is for boldness, bold. So now just those two words inside our paragraph tag, inside our paragraph element, are bolded text. So div tags kind of define the structure and divide our website into different sections. P tags are paragraph tags. You'll wrap most of your text in a website with a P tag. Span tags are kind of the wild stepbrother of these other elements in that it behaves, or it gives us the ability to do cool things like this. It's a little bit different than these other main elements. It doesn't really these have very defined things that they do. The span tag gives us the ability to manipulate things on a even tighter level. So it's really cool. Let's see if there's any more. So there's also some really good header elements that we can define. And they go like this. We're going to see that ellipses in our code up here, but that's okay. All the way down to H6. So we have 6 different header elements that we can use. And so that's what the H1 stands for, is header 1. H2 is header 2. We've got header 3, header 4, header 5, all the way down to H6. So if we put text content inside our header, then you can see that the website, your web browser, is going to render a header. This is a header 1, H1. Let's just copy all of that. Copy, paste. Be very careful when copying and pasting in code because it can get you into a lot of trouble. So an H2 is smaller than an H1, as you can see right here. And then we have all the way down to H6. So as you go up in your numbers here, they're going to get even smaller, down even smaller than our paragraph text. But you can see it's still that bold header-looking style. So H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, all the way down to H6 are the 6 header elements that we have in HTML. All right, to finish up, let's see. Yep, I think that's all we need to talk about today. To finish up, there's just one more thing I want to stress. When you are getting into your projects, when you are starting to actually write your code, and that is that we have very specific syntax that we've talked about as far as these open and closing carets, this caret with a slash for a closing tag. If you'll notice, I've actually indented everything that sits inside this div tag. Now that's not part of the syntax of HTML. What this is more a way that we developers have kind of universally decided, hey, let's structure our code in a way that it is very readable, and so that if someone else comes in and looks at this file, they can see exactly what's going on, and they can quickly scan the code here and be able to find what they're looking for to add content, to fix a bug, an error, a misspelled word, something like that. So how this works is this div is considered a parent element to everything inside of it. And everything inside of this div is considered its child element to this div. So immediate children of any element, when you drop a line like this, when you go down one line in your code and you add another element. So if we were to add a span tag here, we're going to indent with 2 spaces by 2 spaces. So you can either when you drop a line, you can either go hit your space bar twice, or you can hit your tab bar once and indent that line. Now the reason we want to do this is a lot of times your websites and your code are going to be pretty heavily nested. So this is called nesting your code when you indent all these lines. So there's going to be a lot of kind of this whole thing going on where, where we're nesting elements inside of each other. And let me zoom that out, I'll move this down a little bit. So now we've got some crazy nesting going on. If you notice, nothing in our website actually changed. The content is all still there. The different elements are all behaving exactly as we would expect, because we've defined it that way in our HTML and our CSS. But we're now organizing our code in such a way that it's easier for us to come in later and do some work on this website or other developers. Now, if you can imagine something like, let me see if I can just do this quickly like this. Oh. No, it's not going to let me do that. So it can be very difficult if we're not indenting and if we're just kind of in the wild west of writing our code. Now when I come in and look at this, it's really hard for me to see that this element is nested inside 3 different div tags. And it's hard to see that this div tag ends right here, whereas this div tag ends way down here, and this top div tag ends way down here. There's some very specific reasons that we need to be able to see where elements start and end, and what is nested inside of what, and how many levels deep it's supposed to go. I think I went too many. So it gets very critical to be able to look at this and see where all these elements are nested and which elements are children elements of which elements. So please keep that in mind as you start. It'll be so much easier for you now to learn this idea of indenting every child element. And it translates even into our CSS, as you can see. As I wrote my CSS, I've got that same indentation thing going on here. So keep that in mind. I promise it will just help you in the end. Okay, there we go. We talked about today what web development is, kind of how to start thinking about a web development in the sense that we need to think logically like a computer would, because we are communicating with computers in the end. We talked about the difference between front-end development, back-end development, full-stack development, and then we started learning what front-end development looks like with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and kind of defined what each of those languages' roles is in building a website, and created our first little website over here. So I'm going to jump into the Q&A real quick and take a look at any other questions, outstanding questions you guys have. If I don't have time right now to answer a lot of questions concerning the program in specific. Feel free to jump online, jump onto Slack, or send an email, or communicate with your project managers if you have questions about the Lambda program in specific. If there's questions about our lesson today, I'll try and answer those. Okay, let's see. Okay. HTML5. Okay, so this, even though it's not structured like a question, this is a good point. So there are different versions of each language we'll be learning. HTML5 is the latest version of HTML. There are people that their job is to look at these different languages that we learn and add features and improve those languages and send out new versions to us developers. And so we are learning the latest and greatest in HTML, and that's version 5. CSS, we'll be learning CSS 3. So we'll be learning HTML5, CSS 3, and then JavaScript is kind of versioned differently. In this specific intro class, we'll be learning JavaScript, pre-2015 JavaScript in the Lambda school itself. We'll be learning JavaScript 2015 and beyond. The reason that we do that in this class is just it's a lot easier to learn the syntax and learn JavaScript itself without getting into the kind of confusing syntax of later JavaScript versions. So, so I believe, can you share some of the shortcut keys you use? If you're talking about here in CodePen, I type out the name of the element, or not the name of the element because that would be division, but I type out the HTML tag and hit tab, and that auto completes the entire tag for me. So let me do that again. So type out div, hit tab, hit enter, and it auto completed the tag. It auto drops this line and indents for me. So again, real quick, you type out, and you can do this with any HTML tag. So we'll do a P tag, type P, hit tab, hit enter, and voila, we've got a full HTML element right here and proper indenting. If I do something inside of there, you have to be a little bit careful because this tag should be indented. So you may notice that it's a little bit buggy, doesn't always do exactly what it should. But it did indent to 4 spaces right there, so that's good. So hopefully that was what you were asking with the shortcut keys. Let me see if there's anything. Header, footer, yep, there are different elements like header and footer. We'll go into a lot more elements tomorrow. I don't believe we cover header and footer in this intro class. Just realize that there are a lot of different elements that you can use, and we'll talk about that more tomorrow. Okay, cool. Never went over the complete structure of an HTML file. That is correct, John. This sandbox environment actually takes care of building out the complete structure. So what he's talking about is in an HTML file, we have an HTML tag that's supposed to wrap the entire file here. And then there is head tag and a body tag. Now this body tag is where all of this content would go. So everything here would be nested to about there. Actually, one less. So this is the full structure of an actual HTML file. CodePen takes care of the HTML and the head and the body tag for us. We don't need to do that within this coding environment. I will talk to your regular teacher, and she can kind of go over these a little bit more tomorrow. I'll make sure that she kind of covers what these do in a little bit more detail tomorrow for you. So yeah. Thank you for bringing that up, though. That is a really good point. Okay. All right. I think that's about all the questions here. So there is this link that you can see in our chat here. This Airtable link that we're going to drop into Slack. And basically what we need you to do is follow that link and fill it out, so that we can kind of track, we can organize all of you into different sections with different project managers, and then also be able to track kind of your attendance through this whole program and be able to help you with questions that you have concerning the homework, et cetera, et cetera. So please, when you see that link shared, please jump on there and make sure you're filling that out. I believe it's an everyday thing that you need to jump on and fill out that that specific form. Okay. Well, don't need to share. I would like to stop share. All right. That's about it for our class. So got some homework to do tonight, and then there will be in 1 hour, there's going to be, or about 40 minutes now, there's going to be a question and answer period with your different project managers. So please join in on that, and you'll get a little bit more learning time there. And I wish I could hang out with you guys for the next 2 weeks, but sadly, it's just today's the only night I get to teach you. So I do teach the regular full-time classes. So if you join, if you decide to take the class, which I know every single one of you will at this point because you saw how awesome it is, or at least by the end of the 2 weeks once I'm not teaching you anymore. When you see how awesome this program will be for you and for your goals, your career goals and life goals, join that class. I highly encourage you to do that and take that leap. And I will see you in the full-time class. So, all right. Thank you very much, and everybody have a good night.